Greetings, friends. Here's the story. In 2020, after participating in the art challenge for Parachutes 20, I decided to create a Coldplay album art booklet. Each album had its own piece in the booklet, but of course, when I made this in 2020, there were 8 Coldplay albums, and now there are 9. So I'm in the process of creating a new art booklet, which I will put up on my Patreon as a free download, just like the other one, which, by the way, still available if you want to get that. Patreon.com/Carabo You can go download that one. But this new booklet centers solely on music of the spheres, with one drawing to represent each song on the album. Therefore, I've split this project into 4 chunks of 3 drawings with a video for each chunk. And this is the second chunk. Mostly, this is in the hopes that I actually edit the videos together this time. Unlike my original Coldplay album art booklet, where I recorded some screen recordings, I still have them, but I never did anything with them. This time, we're doing something. Here's the second video. It's taken me a little longer than anticipated, because it took me longer to make the drawings than anticipated. But who's surprised? Things in life get in the way, you know? But I did just finish the 3rd drawing of the second set, so I'm finally here to talk to you about it. But not that one first. First, the first one, which is Biutyful. What a good song, right? The drawings are meant to coincide with the songs and kind of represent them. They're like they're not really my interpretations of the songs. They're just what I can think of to draw for each song. You get it? So I do think about how the song feels while I'm coming up with ideas for it. Yeah, some of the lore of Music of the Spheres and the individual planets, or for those songs that we have videos for, I do pull inspiration from those as well. With this one, I was going for something that was very flowy and kind of like groovy, you know, within this limited color palette that I've set for myself, of course, because the song feels like that, you know, and some aspects of its associated planet, Florus, being kind of floral, but really having all these whooshing lines throughout. That was what I actually had in my original sketch as well. This one didn't really differ too much. I just had to kind of solidify what it was that I was trying to go for with that particular image. What I like to think of it as now is like, just picture someone laying down on one of these and just floating along like it's a water slide. I didn't think about that while I was drawing it, but I like picturing it now, because some of these, I mean, the blue definitely lends itself to that. And they're very whoosh, 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 whoosh. That's what a water slide is like, right? Part of the challenge of doing this drawing was getting the right kind of overlap on these whooshing parts without having to create too many different layers. Especially because once I go in and try to add any kind of like shadows or overlays, I like to use clipping masks a lot, which means that I'm usually adding those clipping masks onto like all the layers equally. I'm trying to add these shadow effects to everything, and it's a bit of a struggle when there's many layers, which will come up later, I think, when I talk about the 3rd drawing. When there's so many layers and I'm trying to use clipping masks for all of them, then it's like, now I have to add more layers on top of that. And then if I ever want to go back and make changes, I have to remember which layer is which even when they're labeled, because I do name my layers, even when they're named well, it's still a struggle to scroll through the whole thing. And anyway, so so I think I managed to get away with mostly 2 layers, maybe 3, because of some of the overlap in the back, I did have to create multiple layers. And then I also have these ones that are supposed to be further back in space, period. So those are definitely a separate layer. And then I did create, there's a blue version and a white version, I think, although I may have made them both blue and just given them different blend modes. Anyway, but that wasn't too bad. I would say the bigger struggle was getting these dots and flowers on there, because at first they just weren't feeling natural. I guess they're not really natural anyway, but it was kind of feeling too much like I had a brush that was putting all these things down, which is what I did, but I didn't want it to look like that. And I still feel like it's a little cluttered with those, but it works well enough because of all the other changes I made to blend modes and having all these other effects and stuff in there, that I think it kind of evens out across the image, especially in terms of having enough dark contrast to all of the red glowing, the dots and the leaf flower patterns. So with this one, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It looks pretty cool. And actually, that transitions well into the next drawing, which was Humankind. Because for this one, there's not necessarily a particular story that runs throughout this booklet, but there are certain themes or recurring like visuals that I wanted to put in. And with this one, oh boy, this was a tough one, actually. A lot tougher than I would have thought, and a lot tougher than I remembered it being, or like that I felt it was even while I was doing it. I feel like I'm remembering it being very tough. I'm understanding how difficult it was to create this image, because the first thing I struggled with was this character's pose, because it's at such a weird angle, I think. And I'm trying to remember any time that I drew a character floating. I have done that before, but never from a back view, first of all. So there's that. And this one just is like, I'm not happy with how the pose came out in the end. You can see there's kind of a little bit of tangenting happening at the waist with the background line of the landscape, but it stays. I'm not changing it. It's fine. But posing the character was tough. That was one thing to start with. Then I had to figure out the landscape a little bit. From what I had in my sketch, it was looking okay. But then once I started to also try to fit in the sky, which was the third difficult thing, for reasons I'll get to in a second, then it wasn't feeling like enough. So when you see the final image, you can tell I added in a lot more to the landscape. And I think I managed to blend it together in a way that feels more like a real environment. So I'm happy with how that came out. But the sky, what I wanted to do was have glimpses of those flowing, beautiful lines. So I had to kind of go back into my Photoshop file for Biutyful and figure out how did I create all this and redo that in this one. Could I have copy and pasted something? It's in the distance. So I wanted to kind of have it feel like that, but not be that exactly. And that also wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And I tried so many different things to try to make it better. I can't remember. We'll see in the screen recording. I think I might have kept that still and just colored over it for the most part, but I definitely basically got rid of it in the end. And instead I have this little bit of, there's like this kind of cloudiness in the background. I can't think of, like nebula, is that the word? But I had that with all the different colors, and I added some of the red in there as like an infinity sign shape. So that's ultimately what I went with. And I tried to create those shapes more boldly in the foreground of the sky as well, appearing as like more elements on top, because again, it was all feeling very samey. You know, I have a lot going on throughout the entire image, and so there wasn't really a focal point. So I was hoping that adding those red lines in at the top, one, could help again reference the beautiful ones, or at least mimic enough of that aesthetic, and two, to help provide something more eye-catching. But even that didn't work. It just became another thing to look at. So that was my final challenge with this drawing, was how can I draw the focus of the viewer, draw your eye to a particular point in this drawing? Like, otherwise you just look at it and you're like, I don't know where to look. I'm constantly looking around, but not really looking at the image, you know? So I added in this portal. It was a last minute decision because I thought maybe that could be something. And then it also gives more meaning to the character because they're looking out at something, but ultimately those infinity signs in the sky didn't feel like enough for them to be looking at. Also, the angle of the head is totally wrong for that. But I think I might have rotated it at some point after adding the portal in. But anyway, the portal also wasn't working that well at first. I think I managed to get it to a place where it does stand out enough, and I think it does create the focal point that I was hoping for. Then adding in, you know, having these other elements to the landscape in the midground and foreground also helped, and I've placed a nice gradient over the whole thing with my vignette so that the lightest part of the drawing is the character and the portal. Everything else is darkened enough that those two elements stand out a lot more. And then you can kind of see the infinity lines. I'm not sure that it really pulls your eye around. Actually, I'm looking at it as kind of a spiral shape if you think about it, from the portal to the character to the lines to the foreground of the landscape to the midground, and that's it. Well, it's a drawing. I like the way it looks aesthetically. I think it could be improved still, but I'm pretty happy with it. For this booklet, it's good where it's at. Okay, final drawing. And speaking of the composition, drawing your eye places, I think I am actually very proud of the way this one turned out. It's only one problem with it, but let me talk about that later. This is Music of the Spheres 2. So this is the song just before My Universe, with the audio of the little guy saying backwards, remember, everyone is an alien somewhere. And they also say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Music of the Spheres, or something like that. So my original sketch, I had the idea to have these two little alien creatures on a stage because, I mean, that makes sense. They're like putting on a show. And basically I had this one in the front who is the one who's talking, and one in the background who's interacting with these objects that are being hung from the ceiling. And they're on a stage, so there's curtains. I had a lot of fun actually redoing the sketch for this one and thinking about how to make it more interesting. And I had this idea for it to be, rather than just being a view of the stage and not filling the entire screen, I decided to kind of pull back a little bit with it and have the stage be within a box. It's kind of like the puppet show sort of aesthetic, but it's not a puppet show, obviously. It's just a stage in a box. This visual is actually something similar to what I picture in certain parts of Coloratura. So if I ever get around to doing an animatic for that, which I still would love to do, but I have a lot of ideas, so who knows. This actually kind of comes from that, or at least I like that visual a lot, and so I think about it for that, and I figured why not use it for this drawing? I think it fits really, really well. Now this one was a lot of parts to draw and to figure out how to render them so that they all fit together. And it was pretty interesting to see how it changed over time from just having the flat colors in there to adding in more depth with some shadows for individual parts and then having to add in the shadows for the whole thing overall. So I was trying to kind of figure out how to render this because there's not really a light source that is visible. I kind of just imagined most of the light is coming from the stage and most of the outside is kind of dark, right? Because the stage is the important thing. The stage is where the people are. The stage is where the show is happening. So that needed to be the focal point, obviously. And then I was trying to darken the background but not make it too dark. Ultimately, I have this glowing star shape hanging from the ceiling, which is really giving off the most illumination. It kind of ended up being the light source. Not totally though, because you can kind of tell. I mean, the alien in the front should be way more dark and way more shadow and a lot more backlit, I think. Unless maybe they have, no, yeah, I don't really think the way it's lit works for the star being the only source of light. But shh, no one needs to know. It looks good to me, so I'm fine with it. That's my motto for this project. It looks good enough, so I'm fine with it. Because this is just for fun, you know? And to get some practice with my art. But more so to get practice with making like a whole thing that is cohesive. Because that didn't happen with the original Coldplay album art booklet. Because I was just focusing on each album individually. And so each drawing was relating to the aesthetics of that particular era. Whereas now I'm doing an art booklet that is for one single era. That was part of the reason why I picked a specific color palette to use for all the drawings so that they all had the same sort of feel to them. Now, do they all have the same sort of feel? Jury's still out on that. I still have half the drawings left to go. I think so far that they all work pretty well together. Right now, this one, when I look at the others, especially the other two from this particular set, but even some of the ones from the last set as well, it does feel a little duller than, like I said, especially the other two in this set. Probably because I didn't go as harsh with some of the blood modes, but also because everything's dark. And I think primarily the background is actually a lot more purple in this one than the dark blue because I overlaid more purple into it. So actually, I believe the gradient that I used to darken everything and put the focus on that center stage, I think was the purple color. And I had a little bit more purple in the background too, with the kind of cloudiness and stars happening. And perhaps also my vignette for the dark blue is not as dark as some of the other ones either. Will it cause a problem later? To be determined. I decided I'm just going to wait until all of them are done and then see any ones that might need changes. I think I said that with the My Universe one previously because they're all a little different. Yeah, obviously. They're all a little different. But I'm looking through all of these right now and I feel like they do feel cohesive enough. So once I have the rest of them done, I'll have a better idea of if I need to make any changes to individual ones to help. But I think that really the fact that I've used the same color palette throughout all of them is what helps tie them together the most, and trying to keep that dark background in all of them. So that's gonna be fun when I move on to my next drawings because I have a light colored background in one of them and I have to figure out how is that going to work out. But looking at it, I think I can just flip the background color with one of the foreground colors and it will be fine. So what are the next drawings, you might be asking? The next drawings here are Higher Power, People of the Pride, and Infinity Sign. Infinity sign, I'm predicting this right now. Infinity sign is going to give me a lot of problems, actually. Perhaps more problems. So I would think my first thought would be, oh, people of the pride. This one has a weird perspective. I don't really have that much detail in there. I don't really have that many things in the thumbnail sketch. It's just a crowd of people. So first of all, I gotta kind of figure out how to draw a crowd of people, even though they're in silhouette. Then there's a figure at the top in perspective, and there's these planets in the background. What else is happening? Does it need some other kind of things? So at first, I would think, oh, people of the pride, probably gonna be tough. Infinity sign, it's just a bunch of lines. Those lines aren't going to look good when I draw them. So I'm going to have to think about infinity sign and how can I revamp that a little bit at least. Higher power, probably in the middle. Either way, that's going to have another floating character. But like I said, it'll be from the front, not the side. So higher power, people of the pride, and infinity sign. Expect those three next. When can you expect them? Well, take however long it took me between the last video and this one, and that's probably it. So maybe I'll have some more time to work on these coming up, but I don't want to overpromise anything. But I will work on those three and then get you another video. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching this video. Thanks for sticking with me here. Like I said, the original art booklet over on Patreon, patreon.com/careaboutAnimation. You can download that for free. It's, I believe, bookmarked at the top of my post, so you can get to that easily. If you want to support me over there, please do. I try to post updates and behind the scenes stuff. So especially if you want to get a glimpse of these as I'm working on them and see some progress updates, go do that. That's great. Thank you. But thank you just for being here even. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out. In Humankind, in the sketch for Humankind, character is so much different proportionally and more stylized, and I feel like I made it too human. Anyway, okay, I'll have this regret for the rest of my life drawing the character in Humankind the way I did, but it's fine. It's fine. It's okay.